If you're feeling down and having trouble getting up in the morning, here's a tip. Brush your teeth. That's it. Often when we wake up, our brains go into planning mode, which leads to overthinking and stress before our head even leaves the pillow. Something simple like brushing your teeth can break that cycle and jumpstart your day. This tip was brought to you by BetterHelp Online Therapy, which connects you with a licensed therapist via video, phone, or online chat. Visit betterhelp.com/positive and save 10% on your first month.
Surgeons do the incredible. They help save lives, and so can you by donating at CSL Plasma. Your CSL Plasma donation can help create 24 critical life-saving medicines that may give the cashier from your local deli the chance to see her daughter's championship game, or give your barber the chance to celebrate his golden anniversary. Do the amazing. Help save lives. Donate today at your local CSL Plasma Center and receive up to $1,000 your first month. Varies by location and is subject to change.
Is it even possible to quote-unquote stick to politics anymore? Political discontent has seeped into our everyday lives.
There's a growing movement toward hatred in this country. We tend to hate each other because we disagree with each other.
How can we work our way out of this as a society? Or maybe the better question is, can we work our way out of this? This is the Daily J. I'm Zach Clark. Over the last several years, the political divide here in Michigan and across America has become a cavernous canyon, the size of something you might find in Arizona. The art of political conversation has been at the heart of this country since before its foundation, but things have changed along the way.
In society, people can't talk to each other anymore without a political disagreement leading to one person thinking the other one is evil. Hate is almost built into the conversation. It didn't used to be like that. Even in government, where if you were to go back to the 70s and 80s, there were all kinds of political disagreements on the floor of the House of Representatives or the U.S. Senate, where members would battle each other all day long in debate with votes, etc. But when the gavel came down at the end of the day, they would go have a drink together. They would go have dinner together. And that certainly doesn't happen today. And I think that stands in the way of compromise and consensus.
That right there, that's the voice of Dave Dulio. He's the director of Oakland University's Center for Civic Engagement. On October 25th, the school in Rochester is hosting a Civility Day conference. That conference will be bolstered by the Great Lakes Civility Project. That's a group with the goal of bringing opposite sides together. Here is the Civility Project's co-founder, Nolan Finley, who is also the editorial page editor of the Detroit News.
This is a country that's always been very passionate in our divide. I think what we're edging toward today and what we've been moving rather steadily toward is an inability to no longer recognize that we're sort of all in this together. We're all Americans, even though we feel differently maybe about certain things. We're moving to become a much more hateful environment. Our divisions have caused us to stop talking to each other. We've bunkered up. We only associate with people who agree with the things we agree with. And so we stop communicating. And that's a dangerous place to be because we're making a whole lot of assumptions about each other. And those assumptions lead to some very negative feelings. I think there's a growing movement toward hatred in this country. We tend to hate each other because we disagree with each other.
The Great Lakes Civility Project was started in part based on a friendship between Nolan, a conservative journalist, and his liberal colleague, Stephen Henderson. We'll hear more about their relationship later on. One thing Nolan pointed out to me was cable news. There is a lot of money to be made pushing narratives.
It's not new, but it's more sophisticated, and the tools for carrying it out are much more powerful. I mean, you can get on now the internet and build these like-minded communities of people engaged in disinformation. And you see it in this current political campaign where the President of the United States labeled a great number of people semi-fascist. And, this narrative that if you elect Republicans in this election, you're going to lose your right to vote. That sort of fear-mongering has become much more coordinated, for one thing, and easier to spread. We saw it at the rally the other night, this idea that Democrats are out to destroy your way of life. It's all nonsense, but it does keep the fear level intense.
It seems that here in the U.S., partisan politics have become like our favorite team sport, ultra-competitive with sworn allegiances drawn and rivals cast away with disdain. Professor Dulio says that's a problem, clearly. It's like point scoring, too. I feel like I see a lot of that, one side to the other. We can't allow the other to have a victory.
I think that's on the money. It seems like one side or the other is more interested in dunking on the opponent rather than producing a policy victory for the people.
And then it feels like the American people get dunked on, to be honest.
Right. It's the public that ends up with the short end of the stick, right? And both sides do it.
What responsibility in this conversation do the politicians have, right? They're not solely responsible for this, but boy, do they like to stoke the fire.
They do. And part of the reason for that is maybe there's a perverse incentive that we're seeing where playing to the base is better politically than trying to reach out to the middle. And I think both sides are caught in playing base politics today rather than trying to expand their winning coalition of voters.
Why exactly have things gotten the way that they are? Social media, cable news, echo chamber, all would be acceptable answers. But there's something about our democracy that is also a problem here, the primary. I'm not suggesting that we redo the American election system, but one of the problems that I see, and you mentioned it, is primary elections. They drive people really far to the left and right. Then you have to scramble. Well, used to scramble to bring yourself back to the middle. Now I don't even know if we do that anymore.
And I think that's on the money. I am one who thinks that primary elections have been a major factor in driving people to the extremes, right? Where whoever can out-Democrat the other Democrats in the primary or whoever can out-Republican the other Republicans in the primary. And that doesn't happen all the time. But what it does, too, is even the rhetoric around those primaries, because even some moderates then get pulled maybe further to the extreme than they would like. And that is problematic for those candidates come the general election, as you mentioned, right, where they have to then try to get back to the center. But that's tough. Tudor Dixon is experiencing that right now.
It doesn't matter if we're talking about a local, state, or federal government. Each has a singular purpose: to serve their constituents. That's it. But the problem is, according to Nolan from the Civility Project, we have argued ourselves into gridlock. In reality, if you don't have control of the House, the Senate, and the White House, will anything ever get done again?
No, and that's it. And so we lurch from one party gaining control of the whole thing and pushing through one party's agenda and the next party's agenda. And so nothing ever gets done in the middle. Nothing gets done through consensus because it's, oh man, we got control of the House, Senate, White House. We better push. There's not enough debate and consideration of the consequences of these policies. They rush it through because they can. And it doesn't matter who's in power. They both do the same thing because that's where the opportunity lies. And they're thinking short term instead of long term.
One of our favorite sayings on this podcast is that a complaint without a solution is just whining. So how do we go about fixing this issue? There is no simple answer. But the Great Lakes Civility Project is working to bridge the gap and bring Michiganders together. For Nolan, if he and Stephen can be friends, civility for the rest of us is possible.
There's two different programs we do. One, we just simply explain the Civility Project, its values, and our tips for helping people along towards civil conversation. But, we also do workshops where we put people together who might normally avoid one another to sit down and talk about why they think the things they think, not to talk about politics per se, but what leads them to their opinions, their experiences are, what their values are, so that we teach people to first consider folks as people rather than politics and getting more personal understanding of each other so that they stop making assumptions. But if you actually sat down and talked about the reasons, you might walk away with a whole different opinion. And I'll tell you where we started coming to this. Many years ago, Steve and I were on Mackinac Island, both covering the Republican State Convention. And we were sitting at a bar together late at night, and these two women I knew, conservative Republican women, jumped me and said, "You're talking to Steve Henderson. How could you be friends with him? He's just so awful. We hate him." And I said, "You hate him? Do you know him? Have you ever talked to him?" They said, "Oh, no." And I said, "Well, go talk to him for a few minutes and And so they did that, to their credit, to his credit. And it was an hour and a half later, I pulled them apart. As we were walking away, I asked them, I said, well, what do you think? They said, oh, gosh, he's just great. We love him. Now, nothing changed about his opinion or theirs, but they took the time to talk to each other beyond their politics.
There is one question left to ask, and I'll be honest, I didn't really want to ask it because I was afraid of the answer. Here is Professor Dulio one more time. What happens if we don't figure this out, if we don't solve this problem?
Yeah, Zach, I'll be honest. I don't know where it would end up, but we can certainly keep digging ourselves into a deeper hole. Quit digging. We have to quit digging ourselves deeper, right? And just get back to the quote unquote good old days of the 70s and 80s when we can have instances where leaders, whether elected or opinion leaders, are not yelling at each other, but constructively disagreeing.
Can we really fix this problem, a lack of civility in American politics? In listening to both Dave and Nolan speak, I don't think we really have a choice. Unless, of course, we're just content hating each other. But that's no way to live. Thanks to both Dave Dulio and Nolan Finley for taking time to chat with us today. This podcast would not be possible without the work of our digital team. Check out WWJNewsRadio.com for the top local news stories on demand 24/7. If you have questions, comments, or concerns about the Daily J, we want to hear them. Send us an email to dailyj@audacy.com. That's dailyj@audacy.com. Our theme music is written and produced by Ozone Music and Sound in Southfield. I'm Zach Clark, and this is the Daily J. Thanks for listening.
If you're feeling down and having trouble getting up in the morning, here's a tip. Brush your teeth. That's it. Often when we wake up, our brains go into planning mode, which leads to overthinking and stress before our head even leaves the pillow. Something simple like brushing your teeth can break that cycle and jumpstart your day. This tip was brought to you by BetterHelp Online Therapy, which connects you with a licensed therapist via video, phone, or online chat. Visit betterhelp.com/positive and save 10% on your first month.